Has anyone ever seen that movie Two Guns? I did, back in 2013. It was pretty good. Did you know Two Guns was based on a graphic novel? Technically making it a comic book movie. Pretty amazing how many of those there are these days. Well, did you know that the people behind that graphic novel Two Guns made another one called Damned? Well, guess what? Today we'll be talking about Damned. This comes as a request from Grendel Keane. Noir is a genre of fiction based around crime, typically characterized by cynicism, fatalism, and moral ambiguity. Damned is a very strong example of this type of story. Stephen Grant brings a pretty classic style noir tale, with the complementing artwork being by Mike Zeck, who had previously done some work on Punisher. The plot follows a recently released prisoner named Mick Thorne, whose mind is focused on a promise he made to an inmate on the inside. This was a friend who helped him get through his prison term, and the promise was to deliver a message to his sister. After his friend is killed in prison, he is determined to fulfill this promise, even if it violates his parole. However, as these stories typically play out, there is a web of intrigue and deception as Mick finds himself at odds with a crime boss. He seems to think this involves money he is owed, and he believes Mick knows the location of it. Although Mick doesn't want to delve back into a life of crime and violence, he quickly finds that he has no choice. This request came as an offhand suggestion to get me to read the book, and I honestly can say, with no real exaggeration, that this is the best graphic novel that I have read in a long time. I kind of wish there was more I could say about it, but it would mostly just be general praise, and I don't want to spoil the few twists that there are in the story. You could perhaps say that the biggest strength and biggest potential flaw in the story is that it unapologetically follows the beats of a traditional noir, with some more modern flares to it. You've got the quiet, gritty protagonist with introspective narration, although in this case it's by third person, not first person, which is a slight derivation. You've also got the missing MacGuffin and a series of competing parties looking for it. You've got slimy gangsters, cynical detectives, and a femme fatale. It's an excellent rendition of a noir story, which means you get pretty much everything you'd expect from it. I think my favorite aspect of the narrative was the ending, though, which was actually fairly upbeat. I was expecting something more dark and tragic, but it had a pretty happy ending, all things considered. The only aspect of the comic I didn't really like was that the villains never really were that intimidating to me. In a story like this, I think you need at least one main gangster to be an overbearing, ominous force. Though I appreciated the Tarantino-esque characteristics of some of the goons, reminded me a little bit of a cross between Sin City and Pulp Fiction sometimes. However, the main villain wasn't really that threatening, and the gang never really seemed like they would ever have the upper hand against the protagonist. My favorite character was actually Mick's initial parole officer. He's a bit rough around the edges, but he does actually go out of his way to keep Mick out of trouble for a little while. What happens to him was one of the biggest shocks to me, showing pretty quickly how serious the stakes could be. If you really like noir-esque stories and would like more modern introductions to that style, this is a very good graphic novel to check out. Alright everybody, thank you for watching, stay magical.